Welcome CSC230 to exercise 13. We're going to call this DOM practice. This will be our introduction to the JavaScript DOM, which is the document object model, which is a way of basically contacting all the different elements on an HTML page and changing them dynamically. And we could use buttons and different ways of doing that. For now, we're not going to use any buttons. We're just going to use some methods and some properties, and we're just going to change the look of a page, and we're actually going to populate the page. This stuff here, the main headline, this copy, all this stuff here isn't really here. If I look at this sample, there's nothing in the HTML. There's empty h1 tag, empty p tag, which actually has a class, and they both have the same class name. So there's empty p tags, empty h tag, and let's see what the CSS is doing. Nothing. There's no CSS going on, so there's no styling with CSS. Now, it is going to use CSS, except JavaScript is doing it. So here's the JavaScript. It's actually writing the lorem ipsum, and we don't necessarily have to write the lorem ipsum, but we can. It uses an inner HTML property to actually write content to a page, and we can basically put that in there. Now, that's not really efficient to do that, but I just want to show you that we can do this all with JavaScript. We can have buttons actually run these functions, but we're not really kind of doing that yet. We're just kind of exploring a little bit. So we're starting off with just the background, and I just want to show you W3 Schools is one of the best places to look. There's a lot of good places, but if you go to W3 Schools, go to JavaScript and scroll down to the DOM section down here and take your time and look through this a little bit and just look at the tree of objects. And we're going to be changing HTML elements, and we're going to be changing attributes and CSS styles and even content in here using JavaScript. So check this out and find out what the DOM is and all that. And it shows methods that we're going to be using. Here's some examples, and you'll see a lot of this. Document.getElementById. Now, the easiest way to change things is using getElementById. Now, there are other ways, and there's more efficient ways, but this is the easiest and the most common, because the other ways, class name and tag name, actually, they don't just find it and change it. They actually give you a node list, so you have to actually put the number from the list in there, and I'll show you what I mean. And if you go down here to document, they show you the three ways: get element by ID, get elements by tag name, and get elements by class name. And they actually return a node list. So ID is the easiest one. So I'll show you all the ways to do this here, and we'll just kind of take it slow and get used to JavaScript a little bit. And hopefully some of the shortcuts, the autocomplete is going to work, but if not, we'll just kind of work our way through it a little bit. And again, using document is kind of the outer part of our object model, and we'll work our way in to kind of find things and then change them with properties. So we could start this from scratch. I'm going to get rid of this, and I'm going to go here, and I'm going to start over and just make a new repel. So we'll go create. We'll go here and search for HTML, CSS, JS, and we'll name it 13-DOM practice. However you put that in there, it doesn't matter. Just put your last name, first initial, and I'll create my repel. And the first thing we'll do is open this up in a new tab, and then go back and shorten this window so we have lots of coding room here to work with. And I like to highlight these and tab them over, and then backspace, so they're lined up at the 4 space mark. I'm not sure why it doesn't do that by default. We'll get rid of this. Actually, we won't get rid of this. We'll get rid of hello world. We'll leave this here because this is linking to our script.js, and there's nothing in here, so that's fine. And our style is fine. We could get rid of this wow class. We don't need that right now. And there's our HTML. We could change the title, and we could just put 13 DOM practice, and you could put your last name if you want, and we should be ready to go. Now, this is going to be in our body, and you can even put a comment here if you want. Maybe I'll put a comment. I'll hit return so that indents a little. I'll tab over, and I'll do a HTML comment. I'll do a left slash and exclamation point dash dash, and everything's turning green, and I'll put link to JavaScript file just so we know what that is, and then dash dash, and finish it off with the arrow like that. And you could put more of these as you go across the page. Just be careful that the color's not green down here. So you can put more of these, that's fine. if you do that to make this thing longer, just to be like a separator, that's fine. I think you have to have I don't know if it's a kind of a weird number, it changes that green. So just make sure that this stuff is in their regular color. So I'll leave that like that. And then we're going to work above here, and we'll start off by putting an H1 $, if you're going to use an ID. Now we haven't used IDs a lot. H1 $, and I'll just put, headline. We'll just do that. Or HL, how about that? I'll hit tab. So it has an ID name of HL in there, indicating that it's a headline. It'll just be easier for JavaScript to recognize that and put content in there. And then we'll just put a p.par, and I'll hit tab. Now that's a class, and I'll put a second one there, p.par, and I'll hit tab. So we have 2 paragraphs, we have a headline, we have body in here. Now, one thing I could do, I could even give body an ID if I want. It might be easy to kind of show that, but I'll show something else. Maybe I'll take the H1 out. Maybe I'll take this ID out, and I'll put an ID in here just to show the first thing. I'll put ID equals, and I'll just put BDY. Although that's not typical, but I'll just show you getting element by ID. So what we'll do first is we'll change the background color of our page, which this is our page right now. Let's refresh it, and there's nothing there. Let's change it using JavaScript. So how do we do that? Well, if we look at some of these things here, we see we have this document.getElementById. Well, let's try it out. You can copy it right out of here if you want, or you could just type it. Let's try to type it and make sure everything's working okay in here. So I'm going to start typing document, and it comes up. Type it nice and slow. Document dot. Do the dot nice and slow, and I'll start typing get. Now this wasn't working before, now it looks like it's working. And I'll do get element by ID, and then in parentheses, and in quotes, you have to put the ID in quotes. You could put a single quote or double. Now the ID I'm going to use right now is the body one. That's the one for the page. And I'm going to do a style, and I'm going to do style dot, and I'll put background color. Now one thing I want to point out is when you use JavaScript styles, they're using CSS styles, but they don't use the dash method, meaning that they don't put background dash color, they actually use this camel case. So here's the way they would use background color. It's the same way as it is in CSS, except it's not background dash color, it's background capital C color. So just use that. I'll do style.background color, and I'll do equals, and then in quotes you can put a color here. Now I'll just put antique white for now. Now the one thing I don't think it does is it gives you the little color box in here like you get with your CSS. So that would be, you'd have to know what your color was, so that wouldn't be the best place to do it. But antique white is in there. I think that should work okay. You could also put hex in there, you could put RGB colors in there, whatever you want. You could even do something in your CSS. Now, why wouldn't you do this in your CSS? You would. You would do it in your CSS. I'm just showing you that you can do it with JavaScript. So we have document.getElementById, BDY, and then we have .style.background, and I want you to get used to the color system too. And when you use JavaScript, you should run this. I'm going to run this first, and then I'll go here and I'll refresh it. And there, it changed the background to that antique white. So that worked out okay. So that was our first JavaScript. And again, nothing on our page here, although we got that ID by using that. Now, let's put something in here for our headline. We're going to put content in there for our H1. So we have to find that. Now, find this one. It says get elements by tag name. And then you put in the tag name, and you still have to put it in a quote. Now, when you look at some of this stuff, and you see some of the examples as you go in here, here's finding elements by tag name, and you can see it's using a P in quotes. Now what it does is it finds a node list. If you read this, it'll actually find a node list. So it won't just find the element and change things on it, and you'll see what I mean when you do that. And that I had to look up and find stuff, because you would think it just works really simple like that. Now if you see this stuff here, they're using const. That's a constant, meaning it's a variable. They used to use VAR, where you'd basically use a keyword to set up a variable. And we could try doing that. We'll do get elements by tag name, and then we'll try to change something. So we can use a variable to do that. So let's see if we could find our H1, and then we'll put some content in there. So let's see how we can do that. So let's make a variable, and I'll just call it h. Now, if you're going to make a variable, you have to use a keyword, so we'll use const. That means it's not going to change, so I'm going to use const h. That's the same thing. They used to use this, and I think you can still use it, but they don't like you using it. You always used to do that, var h. And in the 103 class, we still use var, but you're supposed to use const now. So I'll do const h equals, and then we'll use document, and I'll start typing it, dot get, and I'm going to choose get elements by tag name. And in parentheses, I'm going to use, I'll use a single quote here, and I'll use h1, and then I'll put a semicolon. I'll kind of finish that off. And then, since I have this variable that represents getting that, I'm going to say h dot inner HTML. This is a property, and let me see if this comes up here. It's not coming up. And this is a harder one because it's all caps HTML. It's lowercase inner and then all caps HTML equals. And we'll use that a lot. That's basically writing HTML to the page. And in quotes, I'll just put main headline. So I'm just kind of adding text here. So we're getting this element, and then we're going to basically put HTML to the page that says main headline. Now, if I do this, it's probably not going to work because get elements by tag name doesn't work the same way as ID. So I'm going to go here and refresh this, and nothing's showing up on the page. But watch, if I do this, if I just go here and I put a bracket with a 0 after it, that should get the first index item in that node list. Now, I know that doesn't make sense, but it's basically looking for all the H1s on the page, and you have to tell it that this is the first one. So now if I refresh it, it comes up. So main headline comes up. So that just makes it a little bit more difficult. That's why ID is a lot easier when you do this. So that's getting the first one there, and then it's doing that. So it's writing our headline there. And did we do a subheadline? I don't remember on the other one if we did a subheadline or not. We could. I could put an H2 here, H2 tab. We don't have to give it any ID or anything, although an ID is easier. I'll go here and I'll copy this, and maybe I'll call this H1. Now, using variable names that are the same as the elements is probably not a good thing, but just for the hell of doing this, I'll put X H1, X H2, just to show that it's a variable. And then for this one, I'll put XH2, I'll call this XH2, just so I'm not using the same, not that there's anything wrong with that, but I'll put that in there. And now I'm finding the H2, and I'm finding the first one, and I'll just put this as a subheadline. And what's going to happen here is we're creating a variable that's getting the first node of H2s, and then it's writing HTML to the page. And let's see what happens here. There's our H2. So we're doing that with JavaScript. Then we could write some paragraphs to the page too, the same way. I'll copy this, and I'll call this par1 because it's a paragraph. And instead of, well, let's just start it over. Let's just const par1 equals, and I'll start typing document dot get elements by class name. We'll try that one. And we want, in quotes, I'll put par. Now, these also have to use that index. Now, we have two named par, and so that means we could use the first one here. And then I could do par1 dot inner HTML. Oh, there it comes up. There's inner HTML. And we'll do equals, and then in quotes we're going to put something. Now, lorem doesn't work inside of JavaScript, so it works in HTML. So let's just go down here. I'm just going to do it at the bottom, lorem 35, and I'll hit tab, and it just made some lorem here. So I'll just copy that, or cut it because I don't want to keep it here. And then I'll go into my script, and I'll just put it inside there. And I'll do another one. I'll go down here after my HTML and do lorem 25 tab, and there's another one, and I'll use that too. So before I use that, let me go up here and end everything with a semicolon, just like we did with CSS. So I'll end that with a semicolon, and that's using par1. Now the class name is par, and it's the first par that we're using. So the next one is going to be using the index number 1. Everything starts with 0 in computer, so I'm going to copy this and I'll kind of get rid of this here so we could do it from this part. So I'll call this par 2, and I'll call this par 2. Everything else is the same, except this is going to be 1, meaning it's going to be the second paragraph. And I'll do equals, and I'll put my quotes, and then I'll go back here and I'll copy this and delete it because I don't want it in here. And I'll go back to my script and I'll paste it here. And what it should do is put that information on the page. So let's hit run. And there's that information on the page. Now we can even adjust CSS with that. We can go here, and right after this I can do par1, because we already have that variable, par1.style.color equals. Now maybe I'll just throw in a name color. If you ever need colors, there's always the color picker over here. I'll just right click and open this in a new tab so I don't mess with my JavaScript stuff here. And let's see, I have this off-white. Maybe I'll do this in a blue. Find a nice blue here. There's a nice blue. I'll just copy that color and put it in here. Make sure it has the pound sign. Make sure we finish it off with a semicolon. And I'll copy this. And then for our next one, I'll make this par2. We're using that variable again, style.color. And instead of that, I'll go to my color picker and maybe we'll get a nice, maybe a purple color. Find a nice dark purple. And I'll just copy that hex number. And I'll put that in here and see what this looks like. And there's blue and purple, kind of hard to see here. Now we can adjust font size, all that kind of stuff. We can do all that with JavaScript. I can actually go up here. Now I didn't make a variable up here, but I could do something like this without a variable. I could just make another statement, and I have that ID body, and I could do style.font size. Now if I start typing font size, I'm not sure what's going to come up, but based on what we know, it should look like this. And I'll see if I could do something like 1.2 M. I'll just throw in M for now, and I'll see if font size works. Now if I retype that, I might be able to get that to come up, but that's what it should be. Anything that has a dash should be replaced by using the capital letter. So let's see if that works, and that changes our text and makes everything a little bit bigger. Let's refresh this. And everything's a little bit bigger, so that worked. And we can do anything like that. Any of this stuff we can do through JavaScript. And again, this isn't efficient. I'm not saying this is efficient. I'm just trying to show you how JavaScript works, how we can contact the DOM the different ways, with the ID, with class name, with tag name, and we can write these little methods here. Now we're not actually writing functions yet, but when we use buttons, which we'll do next, we can actually make a button that'll change something. We can make a button that changes a whole bunch of things all at once. We'll be doing that next, but right now I wanted to do this before we got into buttons, before we got into functions. We just kind of introduced variables just a little bit, this const here, and then we could keep using these variables. So we can, if we made a variable for the body, we could keep using it and apply different things to that as we go, different things we'd want for the body, maybe the width, anything like that. We can do a whole bunch of things. Now again, why would we want to do that with JavaScript when you could just go into CSS and do all that? You know, I'm not saying that this is a better way of doing it. I'm just trying to introduce in a gentle way some JavaScript here just by showing how it controls CSS, how it controls HTML. We wrote HTML. We use CSS without using any CSS and without writing any HTML, really. We just basically put the structure there and filled it in. And again, it's just indicating that JavaScript is more of a dynamic language. You can kind of write HTML on the fly. So what we see in our HTML source isn't always what you see when you go to the page when you do it. That's kind of the rendered HTML. That's the dynamic HTML that's being created from the JavaScript. So that's what we're doing there with this. So that's our little DOM practice to start. So that's all you really have to do, unless you want to do some other things with the headlines, because you do have some other stuff here. We do have, do I have an H1s or anything like that? I don't think I got, oh yeah, we have H1 here. So you could certainly go here and put something for XH1. And again, when you're using styles, you just put style dot color and equals, and I'll just do red because that's a standard color, and always finish off with a semicolon. And for the H2, maybe I'll just do a RG, I'll just do a green. So I'll copy this and I'll put this here and I'll just do green. It'll be like a lime green when we do that. I mean, you could always look up color names too, so if you want to use nicer color names, or you could try and type them in your CSS and then kind of get them from there. Again, that should, make sure I change that to 2, because that's the variable. So this is the variable, this is the tag name. Let's see if that worked. And that worked. So we got red, green, blue, and then we even threw purple in there. So that's all you really have to do here. Just wanted to do a little introduction here to the DOM. We're going to be doing lots of fun stuff with it. We'll be even kind of using forms and making sure that we validate forms. But this was just a little introduction to what JavaScript can do. We can basically contact elements in the DOM based on ID names, based on tag names, based on class names. ID is always the easiest. There's even query selectors as well that we'll get into, and then we can set up variables. We don't always have to use variables like we didn't here. We didn't use any variables, but here we created a variable so that we could keep reusing it. And we'll eventually be able to use buttons and put functions that we could run events from button clicks. So we'll be doing all that kind of stuff. So that was our introduction. So what you're going to do is you're going to copy this once everything works and it looks like this just from your JavaScript, is you're going to copy this from your Replit. And you're going to go to coursework and go down to unit 11. I thought I would get it in with unit 10, but we'll just do it in unit 11 right now. And you'll just click here and you'll add a comment and link, paste it, new window. And again, I already have your Replit stuff, so even if you just said, hey, done in Replit, that's fine too. But you could do that. So that's how you would do that, and I'll save that. And that's our little introduction to working in the DOM. So make sure you check out some of this. I'll try to get some other reading together for you for this, but that's kind of a good little start. And again, anything that we'd want to review or anything confusing, just let me know. This is new, that using this const and let. There's two kinds of variables that you use now instead of just using var. Notice that it's using camel case, this get, and then each word has a capital letter starting with it. Even the styles, it's doing that. If it's one word, it's not necessarily doing that. HTML, it's using all caps. And if you're using styles, you're using a style first, then you're using the style property from CSS in there. And the only difference is you're not using the dashes, you're using the capital letters for font size, for that, for anything else. So we're just writing some HTML, we're changing some CSS, so we're going to be doing more as we go. So that's EX13 DOM practice.